America, watch your back. The same thugs who beheaded Christians in Iraq now want to bring their reign of terror to the good old USA. And to make matters worse, our own citizens may be the ones planning the attack.
Hundreds of Americans have joined the ISIS fighters. So far, only 2 have been killed. The rest? Well, they're getting battle-trained overseas, and they could be coming home to bring their murderous brand of jihad to our own soil. Mark Martin has the story.
U.S. leaders say they're using every tool to convince U.S. citizens not to travel overseas to become jihadists. More than 100 Americans are believed to be fighting for ISIS and other militant groups in Syria. Their increasing strength is being compared to al-Qaeda leading up to the 9/11 attacks.
They may have again a place to organize a major attack on the United States, and that's very serious.
ISIS presents the greatest threat that we've seen since 9/11.
Overall, thousands of Westerners have joined the fighting in Iraq and Syria on the side of ISIS. House Homeland Security Chair Congressman Michael McCaul says keeping the fighting overseas through military pressure and political reform is crucial.
They are true jihadists, but they have greater access to Turkey, Western Europe. They have legal travel documents. Some of them have already traveled to the United States and back, one a suicide bomber. Intelligence officials and myself are very concerned about an imminent attack that could happen in the United States if we don't stop them overseas.
Earlier this summer, the Syrian al-Qaeda group said an American from Florida carried out a suicide bomb attack for them. He released this threatening video against the United States.
You think you are safe? You are not safe.
Meanwhile, a desperate mother appeals to ISIS jihadists to free her kidnapped son. Another American journalist, Steven Sotloff.
Please release my child.
President Obama authorized surveillance flights over Syria. U.S. officials say they need more information before launching airstrikes against ISIS headquarters there. The terrorist group has been gaining ground in Iraq and Syria, and now with the aid of American jihadists, the question is not if ISIS is a threat to the United States, but how great of a threat to the American home front. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck is with us. Eric, the president said they were the JV team, this ISIS. What are they?
Well, Pat, they are the most powerful and most dangerous Islamic terrorist group in the world, and they are an imminent threat to the United States, Pat. Up to 300 Americans have traveled to Syria, according to U.S. intelligence officials, to join up with this group. And, Pat, if they don't blow themselves up in Syria, one day the fear is they will return here. And when these guys come back to the United States, Pat, they're not going to get a job at a gas station or go back to school and get their bachelor's degree. They will be here to establish a sleeper cell to strike on American soil. We have some 3,000 Westerners who've traveled to Syria and Iraq to join this group. And by the way, these Western passport holders do not need a visa to come to the United States. And we also have the small matter, Pat, of that porous southern border, which I can assure you ISIS is looking at with eyes wide open.
Eric, Terry and I were talking before the show. What is it that motivates these people? These are Americans. They grew up there. The others, some of them were Britons. I mean, the one that took the head of that guy off is a Brit. I mean, he grew up in Great Britain, in England. They enjoyed all the privileges of a free society. What motivates these guys?
But I think if you have a dark side to you and you're looking for the darkest thing there is, there's nothing darker than jihad in this day and age. I'll give you an example. This American who was just killed, U.S. citizen, killed fighting alongside ISIS this week. He was a guy, Pat, who was a drifter, who apparently had no direction in life, converted to Islam. All of a sudden, he found meaning in the global jihad, these charismatic clerics, these radical imams. And ISIS in particular, Pat, is very adept at using YouTube, using social media to recruit. These charismatic imams tell these misguided souls throughout the world that if you join the jihad, you will be a part of something big. You will matter. And the United States that has kept you down, that has oppressed you, you can strike back against. I think another wrinkle here is with this younger generation, Pat, they call it jihadi cool, if you can believe that. They blend hip-hop culture, rap music, with jihad in these YouTube videos, on Facebook, on Twitter, and that becomes very attractive to these twisted young people, many of them, Pat, who grew up playing these violent video games. They go over there, they think beheading is a cool thing.
They've got so much money, too. I understand they picked up a bank in Mosul, got a lot of money there, but are they collecting taxes for these areas that they're in charge of, or is it oil revenue? Where are they getting their money?
Pat, it's a combination. First of all, they are collecting taxes under Sharia law in the areas they control, especially under non-Muslims. Either you pay an exorbitant tax, you convert, or you die. That's the choices ISIS is laying out to Christians in the Middle East. In terms of their funding, they're getting local funding and global funding. That's what makes them so dangerous. On the local level, Pat, they have conquered some oil fields in northern Iraq and Syria, and what they're doing is they're selling that crude oil on the black market throughout the Middle East in places like Turkey, Iran, Syria. So they're making up to $2 million a day in that illicit oil trade, according to some reports. Also, they have ransoms, kidnappings. We saw, unfortunately, James Foley beheaded last week. Some Europeans who they've captured, Pat. European countries have paid high ransoms to get their citizens back. That's another way. And as you mentioned, the banks. When they conquered the bank in Mosul, Iraq, they seized some $500 million in assets. We've never seen a richer terrorist organization. This is not just a terrorist group. This is a terrorist army. Real quick here, Pat, also, when it comes to global funding, wealthy private donors in places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, supposed U.S. allies are also pouring money into ISIS.
One last question. The Obama administration, Senator McCain says they're feckless. They didn't pick up the clue as to what this organization was. How about now? General Dempsey said if we're going to crush them, we've got to hit Syria. Is the administration going to do what they need to do?
Pat, that's a great question, because last week, Chuck Hagel, the defense secretary, and the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey, said, look, this is an imminent threat. They must be defeated now. Then over the weekend, they kind of changed their tune and said, look, it's more of a regional threat, not an imminent threat to the United States. Yesterday, the press secretary, Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, when he was pressed on whether President Obama wants to defeat ISIS, he was asked, Pat, in 2 or 3 different ways. He couldn't answer. Then at the end, he said, oh, of course we want to defeat ISIS. So it's unclear right now. President Obama is discussing some more about what he wants to do about this group. I do think, Pat, if you really want to smash ISIS, and we need to smash them before they strike here, Syria is where their stronghold is, particularly the city of Raqqa in eastern Syria. But I don't know that you can do it with air power alone.
Eric, thank you so much. Stay with it. We appreciate your insightful analysis. God bless you. Eric Stakelbeck, our terrorism analyst. General MacArthur said something so cogent. In war, there's no substitute for victory. There's no substitute for victory. You either win or you don't. And you can't fight a war half-heartedly. These people are out to destroy us, and they're well-funded, and they're getting support every day. It's increasing. And we've got to strike them now. We didn't strike in Syria when we should have. They wouldn't have gotten going if we'd moved in. And Terry, we're not doing what we need to do.
Well, we're kind of at a crossroads here with all of this. We've got a vulnerable northern border with people talking about what's established in Canada already, a vulnerable southern border. I mean, it needs to be now.
Well, we do something with these homegrown jihadis are going to be blowing up. And it doesn't take much to set a bomb off on a train station. It doesn't take much to blow somebody up. And a lot of C4 or something like that, you can melt a pretty effective bomb, and you can get stuff now through without too much trouble. I spent a lot of time last night. I wasn't sleeping too well. The Bible says in the last days, and it's in Isaiah, that Assyria is going to go and join with Egypt, and they will be with Israel, a third in the land. And there's going to be a highway, and God's going to look at all of them as his people. Now, Assyria doesn't exist anymore. It fell apart. But what is Assyria? It is Iraq and Syria. And ISIS is bringing Iraq and Syria together. But who is the linchpin that would be, play nice? And that's the Kurds. The Kurds have people all over. And I think, it may seem like a pipe dream, but if I was sitting down with a group of people like, the Peacock Sykes group to determine what's going to be the Middle East, I would say let's give the Kurds Let's pick up the Kurds in Iran, pick up the Kurds in Turkey, pick up the Kurds in Syria, pick up the Kurds in Iraq, and call it Assyria, and let them encompass current Syria and current Iraq, and we would be fulfilling Bible prophecy. And it may well happen. You know, it's one of those things. Mark my word. I say, was that prophetic, or I'm just playing games?
Well, Bible prophecy is often like that. You look at it and say, how can this be? And then 10, 15 years later, you think, how did we get here?
the Brotherhood, and but Obama and this crew won't back Sisi in Egypt. Egypt is our friend now. They want to play with us. The Muslim Brotherhood hated us, but we've played with the Brotherhood and said these are our allies. They were radicals. They founded Hamas. They founded the PLO. They founded the Hezbollah. And what are we doing? We haven't embraced the people in Egypt who want to be our friends. So the Saudis and others are, but not the United States. We have just, it's no plan in that organization. It drives you crazy. Okay.
Try melatonin.
Melatonin I take, but I'm up drawing the map of the Middle East. I don't know what to say. All right. Well, in other news, the president of Ukraine says Russia has invaded his country. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, President Poroshenko called an emergency meeting of Ukraine's Security Council today as concerns grow that a new battlefront has begun with Russia and Ukraine. This comes after Russian-supported separatists firmly gained control of a strategic Ukrainian town. Officials believe the rebels are trying to use Novozovsk to create a land link between Russia and the Crimean Peninsula. It would also give Russia control over the gas and mineral riches in the Sea of Azov. The move could yield more sanctions from the U.S. and European Union. Pat, this comes on top of already imposed sanctions that appear to be bringing Russia closer to recession.
Oh, that's baloney. The sanctions, I mean, Putin's laughing at sanctions. He's got a lock at home, and he doesn't care about sanctions. What he knows, he's going to grow a greater Russia. There was a very insightful article. George Shultz, Secretary of State, and William Perry, I believe, Secretary of Defense with, who was it? I guess, was it Carter or was it Clinton? Well, anyhow, they had a joint article, and they said, we've got to come to the defense of the Ukraine. There was a deal signed with Russia that said, okay, we're going to acknowledge the sovereignty of the Ukraine. Russia will not invade and will not trample on the sovereignty of the Ukraine. As a result of that, the Ukrainians gave up, I think it was close to 1,800 nuclear weapons they had, because they said this will protect us. Now, Russia has violated that treaty as if it wasn't even there. And all we're talking about is mild sanctions about some oligarchs. We've got to send military equipment right now. We ought to take a squadron of our latest jets and put them over there in an airfield in Ukraine and say, listen, this is a key ally. You will not invade. We are not, just before World War II, we're not going to allow one nation to invade the sovereignty territory of another. But we're sitting by and they say, well, we're considering sanctions. Please, John.
Pat, here at home, a new government report says the federal debt will keep growing rapidly in the years ahead. The Congressional Budget Office projects the government will keep running deficits over the next decade, adding more than $7 trillion to the national debt. That would bring the federal debt to nearly $25 trillion. The CBO adds health care and retirement programs will drive up government spending. And Pat, that could certainly mean higher taxes in the years ahead.
Well, there's no question we're going to pay higher taxes. My good friend Dave Thomas, he was a buddy. He was a terrific guy. He loved hamburgers. He ate too many hamburgers, and he was the CEO of Wendy's. And they bought a company called Tim Horton in Canada. And I said to Dave, is that a good investment? He said, of course it is. And I said, well, it didn't sound like, donuts are a good investment to me. Well, in any event, somewhere along the way, an advisor talked them out of selling it. And so Wendy's sold Tim Horton, and Tim Horton's back on the market. And so now Burger King, which has been struggling somewhat along the way, has decided it's going to buy Tim Horton. So they're going to do an inversion where Tim Horton will become the successor company and be headquartered in Canada as opposed to wherever Burger King is in Illinois or whatever. I was paraphrasing a judge, and a good friend down in North Carolina was kind enough to send the actual quote from the Federal Register, the Second Circuit. Judge Learned Hand was one of the most distinguished jurists in America. He sat on the Second Circuit, and this is a decision he made. I guess they called it obiter. It wasn't the key of the case, but he's writing in it. And I want to get the exact quote, because for anybody to say Burger King is unpatriotic or they're evil, and one senator from Illinois wants to organize a boycott against Burger King and all this nonsense. Here's what Judge Hand said, and read it, Mr. Obama. You were supposed to be a tax professor. I doubt it very seriously. Quote, anyone may arrange his affairs so that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which best pays the Treasury. There is not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes over and over again. The courts have said that there is nothing sinister in so arranging affairs as to keep taxes as low as possible. Everybody does it, rich and poor alike, and all do right, for nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands. Now that's Second Circuit Judge Learned Hands. We have no obligation, and if they don't like the law, they can change it. But the law permits these inversions, and it permits certain things, and it permits companies operating in foreign jurisdictions to keep their money overseas until they repatriate it. That's the law. And if they repatriate it, they'll pay draconian taxes. So they've allowed trillions of dollars to build up in accounts overseas that could come home if we just lowered taxes. But there is no patriotic duty to pay more than you're supposed to pay. If the Congress doesn't like what they've done, they can change the law, but that's the law. And so I don't know about donut shops. I wouldn't buy a donut shop. It was the last one in the world, but anyhow, Tim
You better wait and see how the dust settles on this. You might want a donut shop or two.
Okay, well, whatever. But anyhow, Burger King's got a deal going, and we shouldn't be calling them tax cheats and all the rest of it, because that's just not the way it is. So in any event, if we really want to cut this federal deficit, it's counterintuitive, but it's the way we ought to do it. We need to cut the corporate tax right away. We ought to make it easier for businesses to get formed in America. We ought to take away the incredible amount of regulations that are holding down our economy. And we ought to let the great engine of American entrepreneurship come free. And if we do, we won't have any problem. Okay, John.
Pat, it's a summer rite of passage when parents and students commence the annual back-to-school shopping trip. Unfortunately, many kids will return to class empty-handed because their families just can't afford the necessary supplies. But that's not the case for students at one Virginia school. And as Charlene Abram reports, it's all thanks to CBN's Orphan's Promise.
It was an end-of-summer celebration at P.B. Young Elementary School in Norfolk, Virginia, complete with hot dogs, chips, and drinks. This indoor picnic is the latest in an ongoing partnership between CBN's Orphan's Promise and the school, located in one of Virginia's poorest neighborhoods. In December, Orphan's Promise helped to keep nearly 500 students here warm, with coats, hats, scarves, and gloves. But the needs keep growing. The students here at P.B. Young Elementary School are excited about the start of a new school year, and CBN's Orphan's Promise is making sure they have the tools they need to succeed.
We are so excited to be back with you because we had so much fun with you at Christmas time. We just couldn't stay away.
After the party, almost 300 students attending summer school classes got a back-to-school surprise. backpacks filled with supplies provided by Orphans Promise and Walmart.
Education changes the lives of children. That's why we're here at PB Young. It's why we believe in what's happening here today. Let's get them excited about education and give them a heart to start a new year, fresh, new process, and see what God has for them.
I got color pencils, and I got a ruler, and erasers, and 2 notebooks.
The school's principal says this love and support instills hope and gives students a sense of stability.
They have people in their lives that constantly come and go, so it's so nice to know that, we can depend on an organization like CBN, so that's just been awesome.
Teachers agree.
All of our children are poverty level children. Many of them have nothing. And so it's, or the parents work very hard, but they don't have the money to buy their children supplies. So a lot of these children come to school without supplies. They don't have pencils, they don't have erasers, they don't have scissors or paper or notebooks. If a child has a backpack, they feel empowered.
So while most kids dread the thought of summer's end, students at PB Young can look forward to the new school year, armed with everything they need to hit the books.
Thank you for giving me all the supplies. Thank you, Orphans Promise.
Thank you. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
CBN's Orphans Promise making a positive impact on children's lives. Pat, Terry, back to you.
Terry, what a joy. Those little children are so sweet, and they are so grateful for what you did.
Well, do you remember when it was time to go back to school?
Yeah,
Part of the excitement, was getting the stuff together.
That's
and
sure.
so these kids were all kids who participated in the school's summer school program, and we really wanted to encourage them in their education and to say, get ready, the big day's coming. Walmart helped us with all of this as well. And so we had a great marriage between Walmart and CBN's Orphans Promise, and the school there is awesome. So back to school, kids, with gusto and enthusiasm.
How many students did you help?
Well, there are 500 kids at the school.
500 you supplied.
And now
everyone?
the school, we're going to get involved, I think, with another school down there. These are areas where the parents are wanting their kids to have what they need and just can't get it for them. So we want to encourage families.
Who knows what champions will come out of that experience?
Precisely.
Precisely.
That's it.
This is the stuff of the future. Terry, congratulations. Orphans Promise, ladies and gentlemen, is something you can help when you give to CBN. That's one of the things that we do. Is Terry's wonderful program, Orphans Promise, is funded by CBN.
A federal judge in Utah has struck down parts of the state's law against polygamy. The case revolves around a lawsuit filed by a polygamous family that appears on the TV show Sister Wives. Cody Brown and his 4 wives sued Utah 3 years ago after a county prosecutor threatened to charge them under the state's bigamy law. The federal judge says that a provision in that law violates Brown's freedom of religion. The Utah Attorney General says he will appeal. The Boston Marathon bombing 16 months ago killed 3 people and injured more than 260. But believe it or not, something great came out of it for one of the victims, James Costello. This past weekend, he married the nurse who helped him recover. A photograph of Costello with his clothes ripped to shreds and part of his body burned became one of the most recognized images of the 2013 attack. He met Krista D'Agostino while recovering from multiple surgeries for shrapnel injuries and serious burns. The couple married in Boston. There they are. Costello calls D'Agostino his best friend and the love of his life. Congratulations to the happy couple. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.